Okay, we might kick it off. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura. I'm the Client Strategy and Success Manager at PERSUIT. If you're joining the webinar, you probably know a little bit about PERSUIT, but for those who don't, PERSUIT is basically a platform that provides a framework for external counsel management and engagement. So I'm joined by Ashley today. Ashley is the Head of Legal Operations and External Counsel Management at TD Bank. And actually just recently that role has been expanded to Chief of Staff for the US General Counsel. So congratulations. TD came on board with PERSUIT in July, and since then we've been working with Ashley and her team at TD to roll out and fully deploy PERSUIT across their US and Canadian legal departments, and specifically their litigation teams. And the reason we wanted to have this fireside chat today is that our clients are always asking us what their peers and colleagues in outside counsel management are doing to manage change within their organizations, and how they've navigated a successful rollout of the platform and built out their own internal outside counsel program. And TD in particular has one of the most effective programs for engaging outside counsel using PERSUIT that we've seen. Ashley consistently gets great results in her auctions, but she also has a really strong relationship with the law firm partners at TD. And we're really lucky that today she's agreed to share how she got there and some of the secret sauce to the great success that she's had. So thank you, Ashley. I'm going to throw to you now to kind of tell us a little bit about your background and your career journey before we get into it.
Sure. Well, thanks, Laura, and hi, everyone. Nice to see many of you. So I'm Ashley Woodill. I have been at TD since 2017. And prior to that, I was in-house at GlaxoSmithKline. So at TD, I'm based in South Jersey. I live in the Philadelphia area. When I was at GSK, they're Philadelphia based. I attended law school at night while working full time on the legal operations team at GSK. And so just in terms of my career journey, as I was approaching the end of law school, I was offered, a great opportunity to stay at GSK on the legal ops team in kind of an elevated role as associate managing attorney of the program, of the outside counsel management program, which at the time I very, very reluctantly accepted. So this was about 8-9 years ago. And at that time, legal operations as a formal discipline wasn't as much of a thing as it is today. And so I thought really long and hard back then about, if I wanted to kind of focus my legal career very early on, or really kind of right off the bat after law school on passing the bar, on the business of law rather than the practice of law. And that was a big risk. And initially it was a risk that I regretted taking because I just wasn't sure, in the long term, if that was the right thing for me to do. I had no idea 8-9 years later that legal operations as a formal discipline would be, what it is today. So happy I made that decision, but that's just kind of a quick summary of kind of, how I'm in this kind of role and how, what my journey looked like.
Thanks, Ashley. I think you and I have a lot in common in that sense. So since joining TD, what have been some of your goals, and what's your kind of high level playbook for achieving them?
Sure. So cost savings when you're in a legal operations role is always, well, for me, it's always been, the number one goal, and really like everything that I do, I feel like is focused on cost savings. So for sure that probably now more than ever, really, just in light of kind of where we are right now in the world, right? And then just kind of overall like improving efficiency, whether it's kind of the ways of working internally in the legal department or the ways that we partner with our outside counsel. and in terms of my playbook for achieving those goals, I guess a couple of things, really just building relationships in-house with my colleagues, many of whom have come from law firms and think about things maybe a little bit differently than I do. And so just building really good relationships and trust with my colleagues, and really, getting buy-in from the general counsel, the head of litigation, the senior, legal management team for me has been incredibly helpful in terms of, helping me to achieve my goals. And I guess, one other thing that's been helpful, at least at TD, we're very metrics driven. As I'm sure many of you, on the phone or the legal departments in which you work are. And in the legal department, it's not always so easy to have like really concrete and defined metrics, that help you measure your progress against different goals. And I feel like on the legal ops team, that is something that we're able to kind of offer to the general counsel and the legal management team, unlike maybe some of our practicing colleagues are. So that has been helpful for me in kind of achieving my goals, is having really some measurable things that we can kind of work toward and measure our progress against.
Okay, great. So I guess that leads me to ask you, why PERSUIT? What made you kind of think about the technology and sign up with us?
I guess one of my colleagues on my team had attended like a local ACC meeting at which someone from PERSUIT was there and presented. And, she kind of brought back the idea. And, the idea of running auctions wasn't something that was completely unfamiliar to me. When I was at GSK, members on my team had done, very similar things using, different technology. So the idea of it wasn't unfamiliar to me, and I was aware of how significant the cost savings could be. So it was something that I was immediately open to. And frankly, at TD, we were already doing a lot of the things that PERSUIT was advertising, but we were doing them in a very, very, very manual way. So for example, we already had an internal policy that said if the expected spend exceeds a certain amount, you have to request proposals from multiple firms. So we were so PERSUIT was very appealing to me because we were already doing that, and our minds were already open to kind of doing a lot of this. We were just doing it in a very, very manual and inefficient way. And of course, we weren't using reverse auctions to actually select our outside counsel. And so PERSUIT, we got a couple of demos. It seemed really simple. And that's really what we wanted. We didn't want our outside counsel complaining about it. We didn't want our internal counsel complaining about it. We wanted it to be, easy to use for our team so that we could, work quicker and smarter and get more matters subject to a competitive bid. So it really just, it was a no-brainer in many ways for all of those reasons.
Yeah. And what were your initial thoughts when you first started using the platform? And when we started to think about how we were going to roll it out versus what your experience has been this far?
I was nervous. I was nervous because, I hyped it up a lot.
Internally.
A lot. And, we ran lots of, we crunched a lot of numbers to kind of figure out, what our estimated savings could potentially be. And so I was worried that people weren't going to use it. And, I would kind of look silly because we hyped it up so much. So that was a big worry of mine. I knew I had the buy-in from the GC and the head of litigation, but still I couldn't help but to worry because it was, it was presented to, the most senior people in the legal department and really even outside of the legal department. So I was very worried about that.
Yeah.
But it turns out, everything, I guess, from the time we ran our first auction, we're about 3-4 months in. And, I don't have to worry about that. Everyone has been, incredibly supportive and has adopted, using it very quickly and pretty easily to my surprise. So thankfully, it's been a smooth transition.
Yeah. Okay. Just before we get into, I want to ask you about specifically what's worked and why, and the program that you built to roll out PERSUIT. But just before we do that, I just wanted to flick to a case study. This is an auction that one of TD's first auctions, actually. And I wanted to just show, this is a result that TD is consistently getting. And I think it's because of the processes that you have in place to manage your RFPs. So what we're looking at the moment is an auction that TD ran early on in their deployment for a litigation matter. The auction took place over an hour period. It was extended for about 20 minutes due to last minute bids. But what we can see here is a true market price at the end of the auction. So the consistent theme with TD auctions is that the price variance at the start of the auction compared to the end of the auction is going down significantly. And because TD also collects so much qualitative information in their RFP process, it means that they're actually able to make decisions based on quality over price. Because as this example shows, you've got these firms coming down really close to each other in terms of the market. So I just thought I'd show that before I ask you how do you do it? Let's talk about sort of first the rollout of the platform and how you managed to get such a positive buy-in from senior leadership as well.
Okay. So in terms of the rollout, I would say, buy-in from the top was incredibly important. This was a big change, and rightly so. At TD, we're very protective of our relationships with outside counsel. They really are, it sounds cheesy, but they really are partners, of ours. And we have very long-standing relationships with them. And in many ways, they're kind of viewed as an extension of our legal department. And so, buy-in from the top was helpful. The way that we communicated it was also helpful because we said, look, obviously the reverse auction component is new. We weren't doing that before. And obviously one of the reasons we're doing that is to help us manage costs. But, all of these other things we were really already doing, but just in a really manual way. And so buy-in from the top, internally and externally, was helpful. A communication plan was really helpful. And I think I underestimated that. I remember, we signed our contract with PERSUIT, and, Laura and Josh and others at PERSUIT wanted to have, these calls to discuss a communication plan. And I'm like, we don't need these calls. I just want to get going and I just want to start running some auctions so I can, get some under my belt and kind of show everybody all of the great results. So I totally underestimated the amount of time and thought really that needed to go into that. And PERSUIT was awesome in terms of providing templates and things like that. But for me, just knowing my colleagues and knowing the culture at TD, for me, the communication plan really was me kind of ghostwriting emails for our head of litigation and our senior leadership team to kind of send out to everyone and kind of tell them, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. We need you to be a great partner, reminding them that, not all of this was new. We were already doing a lot of this, again, in a very manual way, assuring, everyone internally that we were effectively communicating with outside counsel about the change, because let's face it, this was a big change for most, if not all of them.
Yeah.
And so that was helpful. And then even kind of after that, just kind of consistently sharing results and acknowledging early adopters of the system. we call them, our general counsel kind of calls it a brag and nag, just telling everyone, going to her leadership meetings and kind of sharing our cost savings results year to date, and then kind of using that as an opportunity to, ask her leadership team to kind of encourage and motivate their teams to partner with us. And so, all of that, it's been, to my surprise, it's been quite easy in terms of, everyone just kind of getting on board. And I think it's kind of a combination of that communication plan, the buy-in from the top, and frankly, I think my relationship with my colleagues and our outside counsel.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for touching on that communication plan, because it is something that people don't think about. Anybody can kind of sign a contract and get a piece of software in their organization, but not really think about the change management aspect of it. And so when we onboard our clients, David and I work with them to kind of build out a communication plan, which might look like, we put together a Gantt chart and we say, okay, on these dates, you're going to send out this email, and it's going to come from senior leadership or the GC, and this is what it needs to say. And it's really about winning over the hearts and minds of everybody in the legal department so that you get utilization, because without that utilization, you don't get the same results. You need buy-in from everybody. So I think that's one thing that Ashley's done really well. And hearing earlier that one of your goals was to build those relationships with everybody in the organization, I think that's something that's really made that work really well, because you have that trust built. Yeah. And the brag and nag, I love that. And in a lot of ways, we have that with you, where we kind of catch up every 2 weeks and say, okay, you've had some excellent auctions, you've done some great work. Look at these RFPs, but like, how can we do more? Let's do more, and how can we help you create a better environment for that to happen? So one thing I also want to ask you about is, not only have you been rolling out this platform across the US legal department, but you've also been doing the same in Canada. And you said to me recently that you didn't think it would be that successful in Canada, just because there aren't perhaps the same amount of clients there, so the firms aren't used to the technology, and you may not get the same response. How has that been, that challenge?
Yeah, it's been it's been fine. So my biggest concern is that in Canada, we just have we have a very, very, very small panel of firms that we engage. And those relationships are so strong and so tight. I guess our worry, my worry up front was, is this going to damage our relationships? From what I understand, there aren't any other big banks in Canada using the platform. So this was going to really be new for these firms. And I just worried about it. And TD, including myself, we're very protective of those relationships with our outside counsel. We value them. They're just so important to us. And so I guess I just worried, because, we just have such a small set of firms. And this is it's new in the US, but it's really a new thing in Canada. It's not, people aren't using, PERSUIT or any other kind of procurement-based platform as much as, they are in the US, not even that they're doing it much in the US. And so I guess it was just, I was worried about that, but our firms have been, they continue to be the great partners that they've always been. I make sure that I actively give them feedback after an auction, whether they're successful or unsuccessful. And I know that they have appreciated that. And I just kind of remind them, as I always like to do, that, we've been doing a lot of this already. This isn't new. We're just using technology to kind of help us streamline that process. And another message, that, leading up to our signing of the contract with PERSUIT, when I was introducing this to our outside counsel on both sides of the border, I kept saying, more than price matters. There's a built-in scorecard. Obviously, quality, and the expertise of the team is the most important thing, to us. And I think, I tell them this, I think they were just kind of rolling their eyes at me when I would say this, but, thinking, well, why the heck are you making us participate in a reverse auction if it's not just about price? And I get that. But now that we're a couple of months into it, they have seen that, they have seen that, they were ranked number one in terms of price and they didn't get the matter, or vice versa. And so I feel like that has given me a lot more credibility. And when I give them feedback, if they were ranked number one in terms of price and they didn't get the matter, I'll tell them, you didn't give us a diverse team, or, we liked the team that was proposed by the other firms better, or, your qualitative responses, I'm not sure we were really on the same page in terms of our strategy or our risk appetite or whatever the case may be. And so I think that has given me a lot more credibility on both sides of the border with our outside counsel.
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I guess one important point I forgot to mention in terms of like our rollout plan, and kind of why it was so successful. I think, and this was, PERSUIT's suggestion to really have defined business requirements and clear business requirements so that people kind of don't have the option of essentially kind of arguing their way out of whether or not they should use the platform.
Yeah.
And so for TD, it's really just two really simple criteria. We said if the expected spend is over a certain threshold and you have at least 3 firms that you would seriously consider engaging on the matter, then you should use PERSUIT and you should run, a reverse auction for those matters. And I think that's been helpful because it gives people like very, very, very clear guidance as to, when they need to use it and when they don't have to use it.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. It's because some clients have sort of a looser framework or guideline where they say you could use it for this and it has benefits. But at TD you have a formal structure where if it meets that criteria, it must go through the platform, and you actually check to see which matters from your e-billing system. You see which matters should have gone through the platform and perhaps didn't.
Yeah. So we are, I guess, if you will, kind of auditing our spend and in our engagement of outside counsel to see if there were missed opportunities. And again, like I have such great relationships with my colleagues, and we're only 3 to 4 months in, using the system. So really, what that is kind of looking like right now is just kind of showing them, that data and having a conversation about, whether or not it was a missed opportunity, and just kind of signaling to them that going forward, this is something that, we should be measuring and that we are measuring and that we should talk about. And what we're finding is sometimes for conflicts, institutional knowledge in terms of, a firm has worked on, an almost identical matter, it wouldn't make sense to, engage, other counsel. We have found, there are certainly legitimate reasons that, the system wasn't used, but I know me, if I know someone is like measuring the things that I do, it will, help mold my behavior in the future. And so that's our goal there, to encourage compliance, although not that at this point we think that that's a problem.
Yeah. So before we move on to how your actual RFP management, I just wanted to ask you, what's been the reception like at the top? So at senior leadership, senior leadership, what's the feedback been like? And yeah.
It's been incredibly positive. They are all over this in a and I mean that in a very good way. I mean, look, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, right? Cost control and management is so important, right? It always is, but it's so, incredibly important right now. And so, for us to be able to illustrate that we are, being innovative and using technology to help us, streamline our processes and save money, really, it is all over their radar. We consistently give them reports on our savings and our progress and the usage of it, and they are all over it. That's, I guess, the best way to say it.
Yeah. And has that been what's been most surprising about the rollout of Pursuit? Has been sort of the engagement at that top level? And when I say top
Yeah.
level, I mean like the GC and then, yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could say I'm surprised at just how focused they are on it. And, frankly, it's been an incredible benefit for my team, just the exposure that we have gotten with people that we didn't really get, before has been, it's just been incredibly positive, and it's been very beneficial for my team.
It's good to hear. Okay, so let's jump into your approach. So as part of, you mentioned that you have business rules in place that manage the which matters have to go through the platform, but you also kind of have built out some very specific guidelines and templates around how you actually manage the RFP process. So can you tell us a little bit about the process to draft and manage, like draft the RFP, send it out, how you manage it?
Sure. So I guess we have two approaches, and I'll kind of start with the exception rather than the rule, because it's a little bit more straightforward. In some instances, we are fully aware of what the scope is. We know what we want outside counsel to do. We don't need, to invite outside counsel to comment on the scope. It just kind of, it's
Yeah.
well defined. And so we will release the scope to all of the firms, and we'll schedule the auction. But that's definitely been the exception. The kind of more of the rule is that, of course, we know what the scope is or should be, and kind of what we want outside counsel to do. But in some cases, we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 law firms kind of participating in the auction. And they've been asked to participate because they are subject matter experts, in the particular matter. And so more often than not, we'll kind of release our initial scope, and we will invite the firms to comment on that or to propose revisions or edits to that scope. So just like a really simple example, we might say, okay, we think we want you to interview 3 witnesses, and then there's going to be 10 depositions. And then we'll collect these, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, proposals from our firms, and we'll kind of compare what are the differences in their assumptions or in their proposed scope. And then we'll just kind of present that in a really simple chart using Pursuit to the TD lawyer on the matter, and kind of say, hey, you were assuming this, here are all of the differences and the assumptions between all of the firms. We'll kind of consider all of that, and we'll release a couple of days or a day before the auction a standardized scope or set of assumptions. And that just ensures, obviously, that all of the firms are bidding on the exact same scope of work, that we have an apples to apples comparison of the bids. And actually, in terms of feedback from our outside counsel, they very much appreciate that, because some common questions, especially in the beginning of our rollout, that we would receive from them were, oh, are you sure that all of the firms are, making the same assumptions? I don't want you, comparing me to someone who's not, who's assuming something completely different. Another kind of common question that we get from our firms is, am I being compared to my peer firms? And so we always, try to proactively address that head on. And for us at TD, we benefit essentially from the initial impressions of, again, anywhere from 3 to 8 firms, on our matters, which is just kind of an added benefit that we have found with the use of Pursuit.
Yeah, great. I'm seeing some questions come in. I might hold off just a little bit, because I think we're going to touch on some of those questions that are asked, but I will leave time at the end for questions of Ashley. But I just wanted to ask, can you tell me a little bit about the types of fees that you're using in your RFPs? I know that you have made a move towards alternative fee arrangements. What does that kind of look like at TD?
Yep. So we only do flat fees. In most cases, we try to break those flat fees down by phase and have a flat fee for each phase. Sometimes it just kind of makes sense to have one overall fee for the whole matter, depending on the type or nature of the matter. So no, yeah, we're not having. I know that Pursuit offers, um, you know, the ability to kind of get firms to submit hourly rates and have them kind of compete for that. But no, we just do purely flat fee, or phased-based flat fee, alternative fee arrangements. And so the process in terms of nailing down the scope and really defining the scope, is incredibly important for that reason as well, for our flat fee AFAs as well.
Yeah. And before you were using Pursuit, did you have that same policy to
We
use?
did.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the attorneys were used to the idea of moving
Yep.
towards a fixed fee. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I wanted to ask you about your strategy and criteria to evaluate the firms, because I know at TD you have 2 consistent evaluation criteria for every RFP, and that's part of your kind of business rules, your guidelines.
Yep.
And those are price and diversity. And another thing that you do that's quite unique is that you actually tell the firms in the RFP what those criteria are and what the weighting is, as well as any other criteria that's decided on a matter by matter basis. Can you tell us a little bit about that evaluation strategy, how it's working, and what you've kind of seen specifically in the diversity criteria?
Sure. So we obviously have qualitative questions that we'll ask our firms for all of our matters. And we have received some really thoughtful responses and proposals, I guess, to those questions, which has been great. And the way, we already did that, but Pursuit kind of presents them in a really nice side-by-side way. So everything is in the same spot, rather than having to kind of, what I would do before is I would print out emails and kind of highlight things and review them, compare differences in the proposal. So that's really nice. And those criteria can change from matter to matter, depending on, TD's preference for the matter. But yeah, so 2 criteria will always remain constant for every auction run by TD. And that's competitiveness of the bid. That's one of the reasons we're running these reverse auctions in the first place. And the diversity of the team of lawyers proposed to work on our matter. And I have seen, I have seen in many instances, just 3 to 4 months in, where a firm did or did not get a matter because of, the team of lawyers that they proposed to work on our matter. And we thought a lot about this, and, leading up to Pursuit, we were really trying, and I think did in many ways, kind of incorporate, a really organized focus on diversity as it related to our outside counsel management program.
Yeah.
But a lot of that looked like, meeting quarterly and kind of discussing different things, and, maybe having different seminars or summits, which is all great. But for me, this is more of a very deliberate thing. Like, you're either going to get our matter or you're not going to get our matter based on, the team that you have proposed.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually kind of very, very important and very deliberate on that front. And, we don't have, we would never invite a firm to bid on one of our matters that we wouldn't seriously consider engaging, on that matter. So a lot of times, because of that, and because of our relationships with our firms, not always, but all things are really equal in terms of the competitiveness of your fee. As you've seen in that case study, we were talking about like a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 difference at the end. So that was equal. Their experience and expertise in many cases, all things are really equal. But what's not is, the team of lawyers that they propose to work on our matters. So it really has come down, to that in many cases, which has been helpful for us. And we do share that criteria with our outside counsel before they even respond, to our qualitative questions, because then they're kind of on notice that this is what we are going to be evaluating you on, and they can submit their proposals accordingly.
Yeah, that's really good to see. And I'm interested to see how maybe that changes and evolves as we get further into this program. to see, how that really, I mean, TD is actually walking the talk when it comes to their diversity and inclusion policy. So I know Pursuit has a lot of product enhancements down the road as well that we're working on to make that easier as well and make that more of a focus point. So that's awesome. I'm gonna just maybe jump to some of the questions before we go into the third part of the session. So someone's asked, how many firms does TD engage on average every year? And of that total number, how many of your preferred firms that you invite to participate in auctions? So how many of those firms do you invite per auction?
So, we have hundreds of approved firms, but when you look at our like top 10 in terms of spend on, on both sides of the border, I would say there's probably about 10 key firms that we regularly engage or would have participate in auctions, because remember, we have a dollar threshold. So if the expected spend is over a certain dollar amount, it's not an incredibly high dollar amount. So that's there. So I would say, we have probably like 10 key firms that would participate in an auction. We have what we call strategic firms. And so these are the firms that we have the closest and deepest relationships with. And so in the US, we have 7, and in Canada, we have 5. So far, we're 3 to 4 months in. All of our Canadian strategic firms have participated in many auctions. And on the US side, all but 2 of our strategic firms have participated in an auction. And those 2 that haven't are firms that we typically engage on like our really, really high spend or highly complex matters. And over the past 3 to 4 months, thankfully, we haven't had any of those matters. So that's why only 5 out of the 7 of our US firms have participated so far.
Okay. And I wanted to just clear up. So TD uses Pursuit to source matters on a matter by matter basis. That's correct. But do you also do some portfolio?
Yes. So we use it for both. So I'm a big proponent of portfolio AFAs, and we're always looking for opportunities for more portfolio AFA opportunities. So far, we have had kind of one, I guess, proactive AFA, if you will, for HR, for certain types of HR litigation matters where, there was no one winning firm, everyone was a winner. And so these were firms that we very much like in this space. And, our message to them was, depending on geography or the type of matter, you're all gonna get some of these matters. There's a high volume, but the firm kind of with the cheapest fee, because really all things kind of are equal in this space, you're going to get more of a volume. And we told them what the expected volume is and has been. We told them, so these are pre-litigation matters. We told them, we looked back at our hourly billing data or at our, e-billing data, and in 100% of the time, the firm that got the pre-litigation matter also got the litigation matter to kind of further incentivize them to be competitive on this, pre-litigation proactive bid. So we will use it for both, but so far, just a couple of months in, we've only done one portfolio AFA auction.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And then the other question that was asked was, is the procurement department involved? And I just wanted to give some context here. When clients are using the platform, there are 2 main ways that they engage with the platform. And the first one is that the procurement team will kind of run the RFPs in consultation with the attorneys. And the other one is a self-serve approach where the attorneys will log onto the platform, draft their own RFPs, send them out and manage that process. So I think you've got a little bit of a hybrid going on at TD.
Yeah, so my team, the outside counsel management team, in many ways kind of is the procurement team for the legal department. So the legal department has been designated, as it has in many corporate legal departments, as like a special category. And because of the existence of my team, procurement isn't really involved in the engagement of outside counsel and the setting of billing arrangements. We work with them in a ton of other ways, but just not in this specific way. So it's almost kind of as if my team is kind of serving that purpose as it relates to, entering into billing arrangements with outside counsel.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. I wanted to chat now about something that TD does really well, and that is managing its relationships with outside counsel. So clients and prospective clients are always asking us about how engagement with the platform can kind of affect that law firm in-house relationship. So I wanted to ask you, what was your selection process like before PERSUIT? And how has PERSUIT kind of impacted the relationship that TD has with its law firm partners?
Sure. So before PERSUIT, we were not running live auctions for our matters. We did have, an internal policy that kind of said if the expected spend is over a certain threshold, you must request for proposals from more than one law firm. And so we were doing that. Our law firms, we worked together with them so much. They knew we were doing that because in many cases I would have to call them and say, hey, you didn't get this one. I look forward to working with you in the future. So they knew all of that. And so, when we introduced PERSUIT, it was definitely new and maybe like shocking to some of our outside counsel that we were doing this. And, they would say, I know you were doing this before, but like to actually be in an auction with another firm is, that's new to them. And, for me, the way that I tackle really a lot of things in my role is just relationship building and just, being honest with our outside counsel and, telling them, we're under a lot of pressure to make sure that we are demonstrating that we are doing everything we can to effectively manage a very, very, very significant spend. We work with them so frequently. For us at TD, we have a very small set of strategic firms that we work with regularly. So those relationships really are very close because we just work with them so much. And so for me, my way of kind of attacking that is, the way of attacking a lot of things and really just kind of relying on my relationships and strong relationships with people to manage it. Because look, and I say this to them, I know you're not crazy about this. I know this is new. I know it feels weird. We don't mean to insult you, in any way. And just kind of being honest and having a conversation and really just relying on my, very close and very strong relationships for me has helped. Maybe that, isn't helpful to everyone, but for me, that kind of helps me in a lot of the things that I do, not just this.
Yeah. I think so when you host the auctions, you don't actually always choose the lowest price firm. And that's because you have that set evaluation criteria. But you've said to me previously that some attorneys kind of worry about the way that what happens when firms can see that they're ranked number one in price, but they don't actually get awarded the work. How does that kind of play out?
I guess two comments on that. One, when we first rolled this out internally, a question that I would always get was, not always get, but that I would get a lot is like, am I going to get in trouble if I don't select the cheapest firm? And I would assure everyone like, no, that's not the only reason, we're doing this. And to make them believe me, I guess, I would say, we have this built-in scorecard in PERSUIT, and you're going to evaluate your firms. Like diversity is something that is incredibly important to TD. So if someone has a really bad diversity score, but their fee is not the cheapest, like this will kind of illustrate or back up, your decision. And, that's just one example. And so I always kind of tell them, to the extent they don't believe me, that scorecard is really kind of like showing, or backing up their decision. And then with our outside counsel, I will say it is kind of something that I struggle with a little bit because I feel bad when, they are the cheapest bidder and they see that they're ranked number one and they don't get the work. That doesn't happen all the time, but, I just make sure that I get on the phone with them right after the auction and I give them feedback that will be helpful to them for the next one. Like if they gave us a really, really junior team and, everyone else didn't, or if, diversity was poor, or if their qualitative responses just were completely, offside with what we were contemplating. And so, again, that's just kind of, to me, a part of, managing our relationship, building our relationship, and just making sure that I'm giving them feedback that will kind of help them the next time, if you will. But I do struggle with that because they are very disappointed when they are the cheapest bidder and they don't get the work. And
Yeah.
it is a little bit weird sometimes when we have that conversation.
And that's kind of the feedback. Any other feedback that you get from the firms in terms of just using the platform and what that's been like for them?
Sure. So we just concluded our year-end strategic firm meetings with our US firms at least. And I want them to know, that this process is new for us too. And I want them to kind of feel part of the process because they are, kind of whether they like it or not, right? And so just an example of the feedback that we got that we have implemented. We have an auction on Friday and, they said why is the auction 1 hour? Why does it have to be an hour? Can we shorten it to a half hour? Done. And so I want them to feel like, because we are partners and I want them to feel like we're listening to them. They are part of the process. And so, just again, for me, it's all about relationships and communicating.
Okay, so before I throw over to the attendees for questions, I just wanted to ask you if you had a colleague in a similar company that was considering using the platform, what would your advice be? And yeah.
I mean, for me, my advice would be just the cost savings has gotten the attention, of myself, my team, and everyone. And I would just say, I suspect that everyone is kind of in a similar situation in that, we're in a pandemic right now. Times are tough for everyone. And this is definitely a way to kind of demonstrate that we are doing everything we can to, effectively manage a big spend that all in-house corporate legal departments have. And I would just say, really, the data speaks for itself, the metrics speak for themselves, and really just rely on that cost savings, advertise that cost savings. It's real, it's there. And my other piece of advice, and I feel like I keep saying this throughout, is just focus on those relationships internally and externally to help you have an effective and successful kind of change management plan.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure working with you the last couple of months, Ashley. We're really happy to have you on board. I'm going to call out some of the questions that we've had, and some of these have been answered, but I might just ask them again. So someone said, is the qualitative aspect table stakes for the bid if the two criteria are price and diversity? And I think you've answered that it is important, the qualitative. Is there anything other than diversity that you kind of on a matter by matter basis might include in the evaluation criteria?
Yeah. Obviously experience and quality and expertise, it kind of goes without saying. But, for us, it's been, who is the team? What's the makeup of the team? Are they diverse? How competitive is your bid? And what is your experience? And we'll ask some pointed questions as it relates to experience. So for example, in a litigation matter, we'll ask them to identify what the key obstacles that they see are for TD in the case, or what are your strategies for success? So we'll ask them very pointed questions that can vary depending on the matter, that will help us kind of figure out if they're the right firm for the matter qualitatively. But that's pretty much it. Quality, diversity, and price. It really comes down to.
And you mentioned rewarding attorneys that utilize the platform. Can you speak a little bit about how you reward them for getting on board and participating in the
Sure.
process?
Sure. And so, like I said, I'll kind of ghostwrite emails for our senior leaders to kind of
Yeah.
send out to everyone, and we'll just acknowledge them, whether, they were early adopters or whether they ran, a matter through Pursuit that no one thought could ever be run, through Pursuit, or some kind of unique reason there. I guess at this point, everyone is kind of still an early adopter. So just giving people that recognition, people like that. I like it. Everybody likes to be recognized. Another thing is, now that we're at year end time, encouraging people, hey, like, you saved this much money, put this on your year end summary, that you'll review with your manager, because, and people are all over that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of another way that we try to incentivize people to use the system, and to thank people, for using the system. And so those year-end metrics that they could put on their year-end summary are always helpful.
Yeah. That's great to hear, that you have that process in place, and that you recognize that does improve utilization and get people on board. Someone's asked, a concern we often hear is, how long is this process going to take? So can you speak briefly on what the timeline is to send out an RFP?
And that's a concern that we still get internally. So take a litigation matter, for example. We were served, we're anxious, we want to get a counsel in place quickly. For us, I would say it takes about 5 business days, and that's because we like to add that step in the process where we invite our outside counsel to propose edits or revisions to our scope, because we actually really like that part of the process. So we can, it could definitely be, trimmed down, but, we try to give our firms, like, again, it kind of goes back to relationships. We know our outside counsel isn't crazy about having to use this. I think they'd be, even less crazy about having to use it if we were like, giving them 24 hours notice of an auction. And so, we do the best we can to give our outside counsel as much time as we can to respond. Unfortunately, we don't always have the luxury of time, so we might have to tighten that 5 days, or we might have to, reduce that 5 days down, but we try to make it from like the conflicts check to the auction, we try to make it about 5 days.
Okay. Do you have any tips for law firms who are responding to RFPs on the platform? How can they improve their proposals?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of different and all very good kind of approaches from our law firms, at looking at this. So some firms tell me, I want to show you, what I think we would charge for this on an hourly basis for, for you, if you weren't making us go through this process. Like, we want to show you the reduction. And so they might come in and say, like, we would like to charge this, but during the course of the auction, we want to show you that we've reduced. I think that's a perfectly good strategy. And then we've seen other firms come in at like a really good and really competitive fee, and they don't move, even if they're not ranked at number 1. I think that's a perfectly good strategy, as well. I guess my advice for firms is, I've seen firms kind of very set in their ways, based on those kind of 2 high-level strategies that I just described. And from what I have seen, every matter, even if it's a litigation matter, one litigation matter is completely different from another one. The firms that are participating could be different each time, or their motivations could be different, right? So like, one firm could maybe want to get their foot in the door in a particular practice area and bid incredibly low. And so I guess all that to say, I've seen every auction is really different, even if it's the same practice area. So I would just kind of encourage the firms to be flexible in their approach and kind of look at it on a matter to matter level, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So your outside counsel engagement program is forever evolving, and you've had a really great end of year kind of a changing that using the platform. What are your kind of goals in 2021? What are the next steps? What are you hoping to achieve with the platform?
I think right now, we're just 3 to 4 months into using it. And so our goal is to have every single matter that meets those two criteria. Again, expected spend, is over that threshold, and you have at least 3 firms to participate. We want 100% of those matters to come through the system. So really our goal is to continue strong with our communications and kind of maybe mix that up a little bit and have kind of different forms and methods of communication for this. Like it's still so new for us. I just really want to kind of continue on and ensure that we have 100% compliance, so that we're maximizing the system as much as our use of the system as much as we can.
Yeah. Okay. And is there anything that we can do at PERSUIT to help facilitate that next year, those next year's goals, and anything that we've done to help improve the program this year?
No, I mean, you guys have been great, up front. So Laura and I have bi-weekly calls. Sometimes we have a lot to talk about. Sometimes we, don't have much to talk about, but you guys have been great in terms of, when I had a requested change to the system, maybe a couple of requested changes to the system that just were more in line with how TD kind of does things. You have been so open to that and have helped us really maximize and improve our use of the system. So you have been, an incredible partner. And just in terms of all of the advice, all of the templates, in PERSUIT that you have provided to us have been so great. So nothing right now. I mean, you've been so open to our feedback and have implemented changes as a result of our feedback. And so I really, any kind of constructive feedback that we have has already kind of been, you've been so open to kind of listening to it and helping us maximize our use of the system. So really,
thank you very much. Thank you. Well, yeah, as I said, we've loved having you be part of the PERSUIT family, and we're really looking forward to seeing what TD does in the new year. So I hope this has been helpful for all of our other clients and people in a similar role to you, Ashley, who attended today, to be able to hear kind of how your unique way of doing things. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you very much. I'm going to end it there.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.